Hi guys, I'm Ivory and today I'm going to be comparing two cream blushes. I'm going to be comparing the Milani Cheek Kiss Cream Blush against the ELF Putty Blush. I asked you guys a month ago in the community tab, I know it was a month ago, what video you would like to see because I could do Milani versus Milani or I could do Milani versus ELF. But about 70% of you said that you wanted to see these two duel it out, so that's what today's video is. So I'm going to be comparing these two and I'm going to do a wear test, probably not the full 10 hours like I usually do for a foundation, but it will still be a decent chunk of time. Someone asked me before why I don't do these types of reviews for powder blushes. Powder blushes last well on me, whereas cream blushes, they're a little bit iffy on my oily skin. Sometimes they break down and they get splotchy, or I don't know, they just don't behave the same way. I never had this problem with powder blushes, but cream blushes, depending on the formula, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I also wanted to remind you that I do have dedicated videos for each of these blushes. I will link them in my description box below. So before we begin, I do want to give a little bit of information. So the ELF Putty Blush contains 0.35 ounces and it retails for $6. Whereas the Milani one, it contains 0.21 ounces and it retails for $9. So right off the bat, you get more product from this one, even though it doesn't look like it. You do get more product from this one and it's even cheaper. So point goes to ELF for that one. I'm going to do my base on camera just because I know a lot of you guys like to see that. If you're one of those people that are like, I just came here for the blush review, like I don't want to see anything else, I do put timestamps in my description box, so just feel free to skip on to the blush application portion of this video. I'm skipping primer today because the foundation that I'm using is really good, so it doesn't really matter if I have a primer or not. I'm going to be using the Essence Pretty Natural Hydrating Foundation. You guys know this is one of my favorite foundations. It is so inexpensive and so good for oily skin. But what I also really like about it and why I'm using it today is because down here, I don't know if you can see on my acne, hold on. You can see my acne down here. Even though I'm oily skinned, the acne is dry and scabby. And when I use this foundation, it makes it look not dry. I know it makes no sense how I have dry skin, but my skin type is still oily. Why is my skin like this? Why can't it commit to a skin type? Like if you're oily, be fully oily. But the fact that I have these dry skin spots is just, it's so frustrating to me. I just have weird skin, I guess. It's the story of my life. The shade that I'm using is 190 Neutral Sandstone. By the way, all the products that I use are in my description box as well. I also wanted to say that while I'm here, yesterday I went to the dermatologist because it was a 2-month update to see how the doxycycline and the tretinoin is working for me. Every single time I come in there, she takes photos of me so we can see the progress. For the 2 months that I was taking doxycycline, we have come to the conclusion that it didn't help. I was still getting breakouts about the same amount. So we have switched medications. It is a different antibiotic. The name, it's a long name. I'll put it down somewhere on the screen, but I think it's the brand name is called Bactrim. So that is what I'm using now alongside with the tretinoin that she gave me. Someone asked me before if I would consider Accutane, and I'm definitely not opposed to Accutane, but I think that's a last resort. Like we want to try other alternatives before we get to that point. So I'm not ruling it out, but at this point, I'd rather try other things before I get there because I do have periods where my skin is okay and manageable. I just don't know when those periods will come. They're pretty unpredictable. I also got my dermatologist to give me a special shampoo for my scalp because I've been using Head & Shoulders for over a decade. Back in the day when I was a kid, I had horrible dandruff. And when you have black hair, it's very noticeable and it's very embarrassing. My primary doctor suggested I use Selsun Blue, which worked, but it's really expensive for that tiny little bottle. And I have a lot of hair, even though you're supposed to focus it on the scalp, but you know what I mean. So I switched to Head & Shoulders. And then only the past couple 2 or 3 years, I noticed in the winter, my head would get really itchy and dry. So my husband got me this tea gel from Neutrogena because he used it as a kid and he said that it really helped. So I used the tea gel and it seemed to be doing fine and it helped a lot in the winter, but I wouldn't use it all the time. Like I would switch between Head & Shoulders and the tea gel. And then eventually I ran out of my Head & Shoulders. So I said, you know what, I'll just use up the rest of this tea gel. And then when that's up, I'll just use my Head & Shoulders again. And that was a huge mistake. I don't know what happened, but ever since I started routinely using the tea gel, it over dried my scalp. And now I get dandruff all the time. Like when I take a shower and I come out, it is beet red, my scalp. It is so irritated and itchy. When I first wash my hair, the first day or two, it's itchy, but it's manageable. But by day 3 or 4, because I only wash my hair twice a week, by day 3 or 4, oh my god, it is so itchy and you see these huge giant flakes in my scalp. So I told my dermatologist about it and she prescribed me a shampoo that we focus only on the scalp, and then the rest of my hair I can use whatever, but for my scalp, she said that it looks really irritated. I have to do like that pat thing because then I just get so much dandruff. But I also got shampoo at the dermatologist. So I'm going back in 2 months to see if the Bactrim, I think that's what it's called, makes makes any type of difference. Also with the doxycycline, not only did it work, but the pills are really big. So I told her that even if she wanted me to go back on doxycycline, I was like, can we not do that? Because I don't like swallowing those pills. They're huge. So the new pills that she gave me are smaller. I can swallow them whole. It's still slightly big, but it's manageable. So that is my dermatologist update. All right, so now that my base is down, I can apply the blushes. To apply them, I'm gonna be using a microfiber sponge. You guys know I love my microfiber sponges. This one is from Juno & Co, and then this one is from Shop Miss A. In my opinion, even though these are both really cheap, this one is a decent dupe, but from just squishing it, this just feels more flimsy, like it's been used for a month or two, but I've only used this maybe 2 times. Whereas this one is still fairly firm, and then as you use it over and over and wash it and do all this stuff, it gets softer. So even though I do like this, I feel like this won't last as long, so I kind of prefer the Juno & Co microfiber sponge because every single time I use these last about 9 to 10 months for me, and I know that's not sanitary, but I don't know. Maybe that's why I still have acne, because I don't replace my sponges enough. That is an interesting theory. Maybe I should replace my sponges more often. So I'm first going in with the Milani blush. This is in the shade 110 Nude Kiss, and I'm going to use the butt of the sponge to apply the blush. And you can see a little bit goes a really long way, and it's very easy to blend out. You get a lot of nice pigment. And then I take my foundation sponge and I like to go over these edges. And then the shade that I'm using for the ELF Putty Blush is Turks and Caicos, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to dip it in there. It's a little bit harder to get into this container. I got plenty loaded up on there, and then I'm going to do the same thing. And these shades, as you can see, they are not similar, but we're going to ignore that. I mean, that makes sense because I buy all my makeup products. Why would I buy 2 of the same color blushes? You want a big variety so that you have multiple colors and undertones and finishes. So we're gonna have to deal with the mismatch today. And as you can see, not as much pigment came onto my face. You definitely have to add more product to get the same type of pigmentation as the Milani one, but you can see that it still blends out quite nicely. But in terms of pigmentation, Milani uses less product and it just is very instant, so Milani gets the point for this one. But you can see that on either side, when I added the blush on top, it did not disturb the base underneath. It didn't move it around. I don't have areas where the foundation lifted off, so it applies very nicely on top of unset foundation. I will say, because I have used both of these products before, I haven't ever tried the Milani cream blush on set foundation, but because I used the ELF one first and saw how that worked out, just to err on the side of caution, I always put cream blushes on unset foundation just to be safe. I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward doing the rest of my makeup. Whenever I do these types of videos, I like to make sure that everything else that I use, I'm familiar with, so that if something goes wrong, I know that the issue is the blush because everything else is tried and true for me. Okay, so the rest of my makeup is on. Normally when I have a cream blush, I don't like to set it because I feel like that defeats the purpose of a cream blush, which is getting that really nice, dewy, luminous glow from a cream blush. And by setting it, it becomes matte. So it's almost like, why wouldn't I just use a powder blush? However, I do remember from the Milani cream blush review that it didn't last as long when it was unset. So I'm going to lightly set it with some translucent powder so that it will last. I will do this on both sides just to even out the playing field, but I will say that the ELF Putty Blush doesn't really need it. So for that, I think ELF gets another point because I know it doesn't really need to be set to last well. All right, so I lightly set it and I feel just a slight tackiness to it, but this is it for now. I'm gonna wear this for a couple hours. I'll see you later. All right, so we are at the 4-hour mark. I think I'm gonna wear this for 8 hours today. As tradition with most of my wear tests, I wanted to include a natural lighting portion. Just a reminder, this is the Milani side, while this side is the ELF side. Now, I think it's pretty obvious that the Milani side looks like it's holding up together better, but that's because there's a color difference. I went ahead and I swatched them, and the top one is Milani, whereas the bottom one is ELF, and you can see that this just pops more because I am light skinned, so this darker color is just gonna show more, whereas this color, I mean, this isn't even blended out. When you blend it out, there's less contrast of the ELF one onto my skin because it's a lighter color and my skin is light medium. So you kind of have to put that aside because I do feel like they did fade a little bit. I feel like they faded the same amount, but the ELF side just looks like it faded more because of the contrast. However, when I get up close, you can see right here where my blemish is, there's no more foundation right here. Whenever I have acne, you know, because it is a raised surface, a lot of the times when I put a foundation or a cream blush in this case over it, usually the raised surfaces are the first to go. So right here where there is acne and a raised surface, I do see some of the blush is missing, and same thing actually on this side. However, I know that I have acne scarring, but there is actually, where the blush is at least, no acne in this area. But I do see right here that there is missing blush. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it on camera. You know, there are some things that the camera can't really pick up on, but I do see a tiny bit of the blush missing, but it's really hard to notice because this color blends really nicely into my skin. So it is a little bit less noticeable, whereas this side, I can really see it because this is a darker color. So with that being said, I do feel like they faded a little bit, and also on both sides, there's a little bit of blush missing in certain areas. So right now they're neck and neck, but this is what the blushes are looking like in 4 hours. All right, so we have reached 8 hours of wear. From the last time I checked in, I don't feel like there has been any more fading. It looks more or less the same. You can see on the Milani side in this area where the raised skin is from my blemishes, that is still really the only area where there is no blush, where it's rubbed off. Everywhere else looks the same. Whereas on the ELF side, I think it broke up a little bit more. It's debatable. Maybe I didn't see it, and natural lighting is a little harder to see, but I think it broke up just a little bit more. And I'm noticing that in the cracks of my skin, the blush is almost like pooling into the cracks. So some areas of the blush are more saturated than in other areas. It's not super noticeable, but that's because of the color difference. I don't know what it would be like if this was a more vibrant color, how that would look, but I do see in some areas that the blush is a little bit more pigmented because it is collected into my fine lines. Overall though, still really good for me. I'm just being a little bit nitpicky here. That being said, I still do have very high regards of the ELF blush. This is like an A+, and this is like an A-. So I'd say for longevity, the point goes to Milani. I hope you're keeping score because I am not. Now that the review is over, let's just quickly break this down. In terms of affordability, the ELF Putty Primer is more affordable. It is $3 cheaper and you get more products. However, in terms of blendability and just overall user friendliness, I do feel like the Milani one is a little bit more user friendly. You don't need to pick up a lot. It blends out really easily. There is a little bit of a learning curve to the ELF Putty Primer, not so much with this one. So I'd say that the Milani one gets a point for being easier to use, slightly easier, because I do feel like once you get it, this works great. Something that I didn't take note of in this video, but I did take note in each of these dedicated videos, if you choose not to set these blushes, the Milani one is a little bit stickier, whereas the ELF one really doesn't feel sticky at all. It feels just like skin. The ELF blush is a cream to powder, whereas the Milani one it feels creamy. So if you don't set the Milani blush, you do risk having your hair stick to it. So it's a little bit tackier. And like I said before, because I have used both of these products numerous times, both on and off camera, I know for a fact that the ELF Putty Blush does not need to be set and it works just fine. Whereas the Milani one, it wears well right now because I set it. If you try not to set it, you'll run into some problems. Last time I didn't set it, the Milani blush, it was breaking up and separating. So for that, I would say that the ELF gets another point for, what do you want to call it, being low maintenance. You know, like I could just slap this on and I don't have to set it, I don't have to worry about it. It's just on my face and it's good to go. Whereas this one, I have to do extra steps to make sure that it's locked and won't move. You know, it's a small step setting, but if you have to set to make the cream blush stay, that might be a drawback. At least in this case it is. So because I don't have to set the ELF Putty Primer, a point goes to them. Lastly, in terms of wear time, like I just said, Milani did a little bit better. On both sides, I do see some of it has broken up and there are some areas where the foundation is coming through, but I feel like it's not happening as much on the Milani side. So for overall wear time, point goes to Milani. I think that makes it a tie, which is actually pretty accurate of how I feel because I love both of these products. I use these all the time. I do think that they are oily skin friendly. With the ELF Putty Blush, I do think that you get a little bit more bang for your buck, but I really love how pigmented this is and how easy this blends. The way I've been using the Milani cream blushes is I will use it as a base. I start off with a sponge and I do exactly what I did today, and then on top of it, I will set it with another similar toned powder blush just to make it really stay. I'm glad I don't have to pick a winner because they're both winners in my eyes. You're a winner and you're a winner. Everyone's a winner. Basically, you can't go wrong with either of these, so do whatever you want with this information. But that is it for this review. I hope that it was helpful, insightful, or at least entertaining, and if it was, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and feel free to comment down below what other types of videos you'd like to see from me, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I would love to see you come back. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next one.